meeting. My name is Councillor Stuart Keithley and I shall be the chairman tonight. And just before we start, there's a little bit of housekeeping we always do. The first thing is health and safety. There's no fire alarm test, so if the fire alarm does go, we do need to leave, and we'll leave in the bottom corner out reception, and across the road is where we go to the windmill car park, the car park at the back of the windmill. So that's the first thing. Second thing is planning committee meetings are live streamed and recorded. So members, please would you remember to speak clearly into your microphones. And for those that are coming up to the desk to present, which I'll invite you if you're registered, please do the same. We'll give you instructions on that. So I think that's the first two things. Just to introduce the top table to you all. On the right, Kira Keller, she's Democratic Services. Amy Shipley, our solicitor, is our legal advisor tonight. Next to me here is Richard Gardner. He's our senior planning manager. And Ryan O'Keefe is the case officer tonight. Ryan's doing both. Richard, I believe you've got a statement to read out for me, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Statements just to confirm that my role and the role of the other officer tonight is to provide impartial advice and to assist members in their decision taking. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And just members to draw your attention to an update report for Planning Committee that should be in front of you. Thank you. Okay, so we can now move on to the agenda for this evening. So the first thing is apologies for absence. So Kira?
We have apologies from Councillors Harding, Padgham, Parry, with Councillor Pemberton a substitute, and Councillor Score.
Thank you very much. And any disclosures of interest from members, please? Anybody got disclosure? So we've got Councillor Pemberton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Application 25/00924/FUL. All members will have had an email from the ward member. Over and above that, I need to declare an additional interest. In that, last Friday, in passing, as leader of the Conservative group, Councillor Shenton mentioned an issue he was having with an application. He did not identify what that application was. It was around timing, which has been the subject of the correspondence. And at that point, I wasn't substituting for this application. For this committee, sorry. I agreed to sub on Monday. The ward member copied me to correspondence that he sent to you.
Yeah.
And again, that was following on from the conversation that he and I had. I have subsequently, later that day, had a conversation with Democratic Services, a senior officer, to understand the timeline and processes around that. We are encouraged to seek clarification on certain points beforehand. So I have a declaration of interest over and above every other member. Having said that, I am comfortable that I come to the application with an open mind. Okay. But it would be right and proper to disclose, particularly as I've been party to the correspondence.
Yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate that. Anybody else got a declaration? It doesn't look like it. I think I should also mention, just in support of what you said, Councillor Pemberton, that, yeah, we've all had the correspondence, but in fact I spoke to Councillor Shenton on Monday about the very same issue of his inability to attend, and also some issues in respect of the parish council members not being available as well. And I offered to read a statement out for Councillor Shenton, which he actually declined. He declined it because he said that I wouldn't be able to answer questions on his statement, but I could read the statement. I left that offer open. I'll just tell you all, I checked my phone 15 minutes ago and he hasn't written a statement. So sadly, we haven't got anything from Councillor Shenton. However, apart from his email, yeah. But there are some points in respect of his email. I don't think we need to cover them now, but I have also spoke to Democratic Services and the planning team about the timelines to make sure I was clear on it, the same as you have. But what I did want to say was that this afternoon I took a call from Maureen Berry, who's the chair of the parish council, who was a bit concerned that the parish council's feelings on this, and their reasons for objection were not being heard also. And I said, if she wished me to say something, then I could. And she's asked if I would say something. So in fact, I'm going to speak on behalf of the parish council, make a statement for them. Okay, just so we're clear. Okay, so that's declarations of interest, nothing else. It's a bit long-winded this time, but I think it's just right to get it out there. Thank you for that. Yeah, thanks. Okay, in which case, since there are no minutes of previous meetings to cover off, we're going to move on to agenda item 3, which is application 25000924. The application we've just been mentioning, Gleanings, Hay Lane, Mapleborough Green, and the presenting officer is Ryan O'Keefe. And Ryan, when you're ready, would you like to take us through the application, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The application lies within the settlement of Mapleborough Green, denoted by the black dot on the map. Planning permission is sought for a single-storey rear extension, internal alterations, along with a change of use from a residential dwelling to a residential institution, and along with a new outbuilding to the rear of the property. The site is surrounded by residential properties, and above you can see the extension to the rear and the outbuilding towards the rear garden. This plan shows the existing and the proposed floor plan. So internally there is a lot of changes to facilitate the change of use to the C2 residential use. Proposed elevations, predominantly the single-storey rear extension. The plans and elevations of the proposed outbuilding towards the rear. From the front of the site, towards the rear of the property, looking towards neighbouring properties, looking again towards neighbouring properties, and then back to the rear of the site itself. And the planning permission, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions set out within the officer report. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much, Ryan. So we do have some speakers, and we're going to start with the parish council, which I'll read a statement. On behalf of Mrs. Maureen Berry, who's the chairperson of Mapleborough Green Parish Council, I spoke to her this afternoon. It's about 3:30. So I'm sorry I can't answer questions on this, but I shall read the statement, and there's an additional line. So I'm reading actually page 3 because she wasn't able to prepare something because she was on holiday. Mapleborough Green object to the application for the following reasons, principally overdevelopment. There is a concern that the proposed extensions result in a disproportionate increase against the scale of the original building. Regarding the proposed change of use, whilst the parish council support the provision of additional facilities within the parish, Hay Lane is not an appropriate setting for this proposal. There are a lack of public transport links for both residents of the facility and staff. There is a concern that there's inadequate on-site parking for staff and visitors, with possible access and visibility issues due to the lack of turning space on the site. Hay Lane, due to the lack of footpaths and width, is not suitable for street parking. In addition, the parish council do not consider this to be a small-scale extension. They believe it represents overdevelopment of the site. Of course, they believe that is unacceptable in the green belt due to planning policy. So thank you for that, and hopefully if Mrs. Maureen Berry is listening, she'll be satisfied with that statement. Thank you. So having read out the parish council objection, we have some neighbour objections as well, and I believe it's... I beg your pardon. Yes, I'm sorry.
Apologies, Chair. Just for transparency and for the recording, the ward member has put something in writing. Would it be appropriate for you to outline what the ward member has had to say in his email? That would at least give the applicant the opportunity to respond to that. I've just throw that out there. We've all read it, but it's not public. I leave that with you, Chair, or to take advice.
Yeah, thanks. Let me take advice for a second, because the email contained various statements. It wasn't just simply a statement about the objections to this proposal. The email was about the process that had been followed, and also about an independent assessment of the proposal that we cannot identify. So let me just hold on and I'll ask legal. Just wait a minute and we'll just get it clear, because this is recorded. I've received nothing, and as Amy Shipley has just said, Councillor Shenton has not put it forward as a statement to be read out. So I think it's best we don't take that. So
I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah.
It's just about
I think that's right.
transparency.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Fair to ask the point. So we have neighbour Julie. Is it Julie Reeves? Oh, welcome, Julie. Come on up to the desk. So you can see what I'm doing, speaking into the microphone. And I've got a big voice. So there's a little button on the right, I think, and if you press it, a little red light will come on. Yeah, so that would mean that you're live. We do give you a set time, it's 3 minutes, and what I'll do is I'll give you a little heads up when you've got 30 seconds to go. And whenever you're ready to start, you can just...
First of all, could I just send Mick Coates his apologies, who was originally
Yeah.
doing this presentation, but unfortunately he's unwell. So
Oh, right.
I've
I'm sorry to hear that.
had 5 minutes to notice.
He gave it to you.
Yes.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I'd just
Well,
like to mention
it's
that.
your chance of to be famous, because it's
That's
recorded, but you'll be fine.
Fine.
So
and is it 3 minutes or 6 minutes?
you'll have had enough after 3, I think.
Right,
So
okay.
I will give you 30
I obviously haven't
seconds.
timed it, so I didn't
Yeah.
know. how
No,
long
it's
it
fine,
would take
Julie.
to-
It's fine, and don't worry, it's fine. So when you're ready to start the reading, you just start.
Right, well, thank you for the opportunity. On behalf of the residents of Mappleborough Green, I respectfully urge the committee to refuse this application. First of all, can I point out that the previous planning reference 2303-109 replacement dwelling that states it's been refused is dated the 5th of August 25, so obviously incorrect, along with other issues on the document. Analysis of the development plan has led to the conclusion that it merely consists of pulling together relevant policies, but undertakes no substantial analysis of the 24 objections received from the residents and the 55 signatures on the petition that was also handed in. Hence, please could these be reviewed together with the following material planning reasons. Firstly, planning decisions must align with the local development plan and the national planning policy framework. This proposal clearly fails to meet both. The site is within designated green belt, and the proposed use introduces intensified development, operational activity and vehicle movements that would harm the openness and amenity of the area. This conflicts with Greenbelt policy, which seeks to protect the countryside from inappropriate and urbanising developments. Highways and infrastructure concerns are also significant. Hay Lane is a narrow rural lane with no pavements and poor visibility splays. Despite the Highway Authority raising no objection, their assessment fails to consider key operational factors such as shift-based staff handovers, visitor parking and commercial waste collections. The street cannot accommodate this safely, particularly when combined with continued agricultural use. The absence of staff pedestrian links and suitable access routes renders this location fundamentally unsuitable for institutional use. In terms of design and scale, this development represents overdevelopment of the site. The property has already been substantially extended, and it's inconsistent with policy S9 and paragraph 130 of the NPPF, which call for development that is sympathetic to local character and built form. The introduction of a residential institution will result in increased operational noise, vehicle movement and light pollution during unsociable hours, leading to unacceptable disturbance to neighbouring properties. This has direct consequences for the health and well-being of existing residents, particularly in a quiet rural setting where peace and tranquility are key to residential amenity. These disturbances contradict local plan policies at protecting residential amenity and do not align with the core planning objective to create safe and healthy communities. Breaches core strategy policy CS9, design and distinctiveness, which seeks to preserve the character and tranquility of rural settlements.
Julie, could you, we're going up to time, so if you could sort of wrap up now for us, if you would, please.
I suppose a key thing is that we must draw attention to the legal covenant affecting the land. The property was originally sold under conditions restricting its use to private residential purposes. Permitting a change to C2 institutional use would breach this legal covenant and potentially expose the council to legal challenge. We respectfully ask the committee to refuse the application in accordance with the development plan and national planning guidance. If there's any doubt of the reasons why your decision is not to refuse, perhaps you'd be kind enough to attend site and visit the site.
Right, thank you very much, Julie. Okay, so now's an opportunity for members to ask you questions or clarifications, if you can. Has anybody got any questions? Yeah, Councillor Harvey, thank you.
Evening, Mr. Reeves. Local knowledge, please. What's proposed is to convert this into effectively a 4-bedroom unit. I won't call it a residence, but it's a 4-bedroom unit. Do you know how many other 4-bedroom units there are in this particular road?
I don't know the exact number of bedroom properties which are sort of inhabited by, you know, parents with 2 children, for example. So I haven't got the facts, unfortunately, no.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Oh, did you have a follow-up? Sorry.
Well, just to put that into context then, are you saying to us that a 4-bedroom unit, whatever its use might be, is unusual for the road, for the area? Is that what you're saying?
No, a 4-bedroom property isn't unusual. Looking at the site, extending it, the property has already been substantially extended as it is. So extending it further and having an annex in the garden, basically, if it was just a pure office within the garden, then you wouldn't need a shower room, kitchen, etc., and all the facilities to be able to live in the garden. But the proposal itself is the extension, the volume has already been, as we understood it, extended to maximum capacity.
Okay, thank you. Now, Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good evening. Thank you for reading that out. It's always difficult, particularly at the last moment. So
there was a bit more, but
I am going to ask you some more local knowledge questions.
Right.
Can you help us in explaining the layout of Hay Lane? Is it a single track carriageway each way? Is it smaller than that? What does Hay Lane look like? And following on from that, what's the sort of parking arrangements around Hay Lane?
In Hay Lane, at a push, 2 small vehicles can pass. If a larger vehicle comes, then it goes over people's property onto the grass verges and damages sort of part of theirs. Further up the lane, it's single track in parts. So yes, in parts there's 2 small vehicles that can get past. Further up the lane, only 1 vehicle. There's no footpath anywhere in Hay Lane. So there's no footpath at all. The footpath is on the main A435, but you've got to get to the 435. And obviously with tractors and things coming down from the farm machine.
I think we have some photographs for later when you ask the officers.
Okay. I do want to just some understanding of local knowledge, because photographs will be taken at a particular time. So, for example, and I hope you'll be able to help me. How does the refuse truck manage to get up and down? Does it have to reverse down? How does that
The
work?
refuse truck comes down, but then it creates, people have to wait to pass to get up the lane if they're coming in the opposite direction.
So how does it get back out again?
You come from the top, it comes from the top down, from the
Okay.
Henley Road, straight down Hay Lane, onto the 435, so it comes one way down.
And my final question is bus services in Mappleborough Green.
I'm not aware of any bus services. There's no train station, and I'm not aware of...
Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Anybody else like to ask a question? Councillor Passingham.
You mentioned a covenant saying that it should only be used as private dwelling. Yeah. Have you got evidence of that?
Yes, we have. We've got residents here today that have submitted copies of their deeds to the planning, because there's a number of properties. My property's opposite, and mine states the deed, but the other residents have actually got it detailed, this specific property. So
Okay.
the 5 bungalows on the other side of the road
I've
got this.
taken some
evidence as well.
advice. Taken some advice from our solicitor, Councillor Passingham, that the covenant on the property is not a planning matter. That's in respect of the covenants on the freehold. Okay, so it's not a consideration in planning terms. Okay. I can't see any further questions, so thank you very much for your presentation and answering the questions. Thank you, it's helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, so next we have the agent speaking on behalf of the applicant. That's Penelope Kelly. Come forward. Good evening, Ms. Kelly. How are you? All right. Yes, thank you, yeah. We're fine. So I've got you down for 3 minutes. So the button on the right will turn the microphone on. You haven't submitted any photographs or anything for the case officer to show? Okay, so whenever you're ready, and I'll give you a sort of heads up when you're coming towards the end.
Thank you, thank you. First of all, thank you for giving us this time to come and speak with you today. I'm a little bit shocked at the amount of objections for what we want to do, and just to put everybody's mind at ease. We haven't just jumped into this in the last 10 minutes. This is, it's not a career choice, it's a vocation, and we've all been working in it for over 30 years. We support individuals with severe learning disabilities, and where they live should be where you and I could live as well. One of the directors of Haven Ridge actually lives in that dwelling, and has done so for some time now. But he's ready to move on, but we love the area, and we think working with the funding authorities that we work with, there is an absolute need for some individuals with severe learning disabilities and sensory integration processing to have these quieter areas where they can live. There's not going to be any change to noise levels. I'm a little bit shocked over the traffic and the waste disposal and stuff like that, because it would essentially be operating as a domestic dwelling like you and I would live. The bin will go out on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or whatever day. Visitors, these guys that we tend to care for, we care for because it's really difficult for them to remain within the family setting for a multitude of reasons. So there's autism as well that can be involved. So these guys going home, or mum, dad, brother, sister, aunt, nan, granddad, visiting them in a new home can actually become very, very confusing. So visits tend to be in neutral places, away from where they live, away from where family live as well. So the traffic coming up and down, I don't get that. I don't get that as an objection at all. And if people would have come and spoken with us, we would happily explain that. But they haven't. They haven't, which is a shame, because our guys don't have two heads. They don't have 8 legs. You know, they don't jump about screaming and shouting 24 hours a day. They just live like you and I do. And that's it. But they need support. And that's what we offer, support.
All right, well, thank you very much. And that was exactly 3 minutes, by the way, and you did it without any
Thank you.
timer. So, right, so an opportunity for members to ask you a few questions. So, Councillor Henshaw-Seraphin.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening.
Good evening.
Have you had any communications with the parish council at all?
No.
No.
No, we haven't.
Well, it's
No,
usually the way
only,
to go and discuss things with
yeah.
the parish council.
Yeah. It was very, very difficult when, you know, we put it out that this was something that we were looking to do, and we were hit with basically a brick wall, which is unfortunate and a little bit sad as well that that happens.
All right. I think the question was you hadn't had the interactions with Parish Council.
No.
Councillor Eden had a question next.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening.
Good evening.
Just a question around the residents of this institution. Are they permanent residents? Are they respite type residents? Are they a mixture of both?
We do permanent residents, and is it right that we still call a residential care home an institution? Because if I had that on any of our documentation, CQC would not be happy with me.
Sorry, did you have a follow-up?
Only as I refer to it as an institution because that's what it's written as in front of me on the document here and the application. Just to make that clear.
It's one of the categories of change of use for planning. There's a whole raft of descriptions for things. It just happens to fall into this category.
I've worked in it a very long time, and if I called it an institution, I wouldn't.
I understand
be able to work in it.
So, Councillor Pemberton's got a question for you.
Councillor Pemberton has a few questions.
That's fine. That's fine.
And to be fair, the Town and Country Planning Act was written in a long time ago in a galaxy far away, where phraseology is not what it would be today. To be fair, and Chair, I would like you to bear with me with some of these questions because it may not be immediately apparent why there's a planning reason for me to ask, but I will get to that. More in debate than anything else, I suspect. The applicant is Harry Singh.
That's correct.
Who is the provider? You talked about CQC. Who's the
Haven
provider?
Ridge.
Haven Ridge. And is that a CQC registered provider?
Not at the moment.
Not a CQC registered provider. Can you talk me through, you've got 4 units and you talk about the occupiers of those units having a range of learning disabilities.
Yes.
So we're talking about adults here.
We are.
We are.
18
okay.
to 65.
Okay, and there is a very similar, very successful unit in my own ward, Murray House, which is, I think, a 12-bed unit, runs really successfully. Brilliant. What's your staffing regime? And I'm talking, numbers, rotations. What's your staffing regime?
Well, our reputation is quite big in supporting young people with both dual learning disabilities and autism spectrum disorder, of which there can be lots of sensory integration processing problems for these guys.
Yep.
So how we operate is quite simply to keep and ensure low arousal at all times.
Yep.
Hence why this property and the area that it's in is just absolutely super.
I follow the logic there.
It's very quiet and
Yep.
yeah.
So how many staff?
So it tends to be 1 staff per service user.
So it's 4 staff.
Yeah.
24/7 shifts?
24/7.
So that's
Rotating once a day. So there'll be at 8 a.m. We operate 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. So it's
in
one
any
change
day,
of staff.
In any one day, you've got 8 staff on site.
Yeah, 4
Two
at a time.
shifts, yeah.
Yeah.
And you're not CQC, so there's no care element.
There will be a care element. Obviously, we haven't gone to CQC
Well, there
to
won't be if
register
you're not
yet.
CQC registered.
Well, we can't go to CQC if planning
Okay,
tells us no, we can't do
that's
that.
not a planning thing. It was just out of interest. The funding authorities, you
Yes.
say which funding authorities are you working with?
We work with Worcester. Currently, we work with Worcester, Shropshire, South Staffordshire, Birmingham IST, Telford and Wrekin.
Okay, right. What engagement have you had with Warwickshire County Council supported living and independent living team?
None for supported living. We are residential, not supported living.
Well, it's just the
Yeah.
title. They cover all
Yeah.
of that. So what engagement have you had with
We
Warwickshire
haven't,
County
because it would be foolish of us to make that
Council? Okay.
prior to
Okay.
being accepted.
Councillor
within-
Pemberton, can I just ask, I know you said you were going to get to some material
Well,
planning
y-
issues.
well,
Can you
I-
just give us a feel? I mean, you clearly have some knowledge in this field,
I-
but we are spending quite a bit of time
Okay.
on matters of detail. What is it that you wish to get to? Is it about intensification of use, is
no.
it, or vehicles, or
No.
can you help us understand where you're
Okay.
going?
Okay, because that was the point I needed to understand to understand what the operation is, to understand whether it would be a site that should engage the county council's services. They historically have always been a consultee around the suitability of units such as this across this district. I can see nothing in the planning report that says there's been any engagement. The officer used to be Tim Willis, it's no longer, who, you know, officers of the county have appeared at this planning committee in the past, and I'm trying to understand whether, you know, this is actually the right unit in the right place.
Yeah.
And in the same way that from a highways perspective, we go to highways, my concern, and I will come to this, is that there's been no engagement with the county council, who advise and have a strategy and plan about the delivery of services such as this across this district. So
Okay,
I needed
so,
to
yeah,
understand
I
to
get-
see whether it falls within, and it certainly does from my perspective.
Okay,
Thank you.
then
Is
I'm
it-
just...
Is it possible to add I absolutely get your point. I absolutely do. But having worked at developing services for an extremely long time, what I do need to say here is no authority will engage with you until you're in a position where you can say, okay, can we work with you at building the right sport?
Right, I'm going to draw close to
I've
this
got no
line
more
of...
questions.
No, I'm going to just hold that for a second, because I'm just going to ask Richard for a bit of point of clarification in respect to what you said about the planning team engaging with the authority in respect of what you said was right development, right house, right place, and they've been being a consultee, because I'm not clear on that, and I just need a point of clarification on that. Well, let me just ask Richard for a response on it, if you wouldn't mind, Councillor Pemberton. Thank you. You strayed just outside of my comfort zone on this, somewhat.
You've kind of answered the question there, Councillor Pemberton. They're not a statutory consultee. We could consult them, and we do consult them on, I would say, larger schemes than this. What I would need to know is what added information they could give us that's not covered in the report, because we've looked at the planning principle, we've looked at residential amenity and traffic and those kind of things. If there's an issue with the location in terms of the needs of the business, I would expect that to be picked up by CQC. Beyond that, it's an option to consult the county, but I'm not sure what we're looking for from them.
Chair, I think I think this is getting into clarification and debate, I think so.
Yeah, okay, let's leave that.
Yeah.
Super. Thank you. Hang on a second. I'll just see if there are any further questions from... Councillor Adam had a question for you. Yeah.
Thank you. I was just wondering, through your experience, are you aware of other similar facilities in the area? Okay, and you said you've been working in this area for a long time within the district.
I meant, when I said area, I meant in the field of supporting individuals with learning disabilities and autism.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. If there are no further questions, thank you very much, Ms. Kelly.
Thank you.
I heard what you said at the start about, you know, you were a bit surprised about the level of objection, but, you know, often this is the case when there are developments that people don't really understand what they're about, and, you know, it's a residential area. I can understand why people are a little bit concerned, and they raise these objections, and it's part of this process. And that's why we do it like this, so people can have the opportunity to say how they feel, and then they can listen to the evidence, which is, thank you very much for presenting it.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. I think that's no further speakers. In which case, members, here's the opportunity to ask points of clarification from the officers, if anybody has a question. The number of hands going up, let's take them in order. Okay, no problem. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got two areas of question. There is no definition of what overdevelopment is. I suspect, however, that the case officer, in assessing this application, posed the question to themselves whether this was overdevelopment or not. Clearly, there are some people who think it is overdevelopment, but the recommendation is to grant, which must mean it's not overdevelopment or not considered to be overdevelopment. Could someone explain to me why they don't regard it as overdevelopment? Question number one.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I'll go to the Greenbelt section, and I think that will hopefully provide you a little bit of clarification. So we acknowledge, as it has been mentioned, that the property itself has previously been extended. But I think what is crucial here is, yes, there is an extension proposed to the rear and with the outbuilding. But as we set out within the reports, the proposal is to take the previous extensions, demolish them, and replace with one single story extension. So there's an element of consolidation of built form. And in that regard, we've done a balancing assessment to say, well, in our view, based on that principle, it would not count as overdevelopment in that regard.
Just before you ask your second question, Ryan, would you also comment on the footprint, please? Yep. Because I think Councillor Harvey's very interested in whether it's overdevelopment, and certainly a lot of objections have been.
Yeah, so the original dwelling, we calculated to have a footprint of 100 square meters. Previous extensions enlarged that to 130 square meters, and the proposed extension and alterations would bring that to 91.4 square meters.
Thank you, Ryan. And the plan you're showing up there shows the building lines, doesn't it?
Correct, yeah.
Councillor Harvey, you've got another one, I think. Another question.
Yes, can I just thank you for your supplementary question, because that was going to be my supplementary question. But my second question is to do with traffic. Criticism is that this development will involve changeovers of staff, 4 on site, 4 coming on site, meaning eight cars. there may be some visitors, there may not be some visitors. This is a road which has no footpaths. There is the potential for parking. If parking can't be accommodated on site, there is potential for parking in an area where it would cause some difficulty. There is criticism that there is no factual evidence of traffic numbers, projected or actual. I wonder if the officer still feels confident that there is enough traffic information to merit the conclusion that what is proposed is acceptable.
No, thank you, Councillor. Obviously, guided by Highways on the application to have their input, and obviously you go from a single dwelling to a residential property with 4 individual bedrooms with the additional care. You will obviously raise in your mind the potential impact. The driveway on the property is large at present. Obviously they've set out the staffing ratio and that they can provide 5 car parking spaces, as you can see on the block plan above you. So in that respect, it can hold the required parking for 4 staff at any given time, and an additional space which the application statement in support of the application set out would be for the residents to use as when, but there still remains a large driveway where additional capacity could be used if needed.
Supplementary.
Yes, of course.
Members of staff are arriving and departing by car. Are you saying by definition there is insufficient car parking space on the site in order to accommodate all 8 cars, even if that is only for a 10, 15, 20-minute handover period? Are you saying that is factually the case?
I think the other thing to bear in mind is, as stated in the report, it's in a location that our core strategy says is sustainable and accessible by means other than the car. And within a 15-minute walk from here, you've got a large chunk of Redditch, you've got a large chunk of Studley, so it's not inconceivable that people would walk to the site. It's not inconceivable that people would cycle to work at the site. So it's not necessarily the case that everyone will drive to the site because of its location, which is why Mappleborough Green is a sustainable location in our plan.
Right, thank you. I'm glad you pointed that out, Richard. I was going to ask about the sustainability of the location. Lewis, Councillor Adam.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, with regards to the Greenbelt policy, reading the report, I get the impression that you're relying on Part B, which is small scale extension, as opposed to Part A, which starts discussing the need being identified. Is that correct? Because part of my thought process was, is there an identified need that will be met by this type of facility? Whereas if it's relying on Part B, that's not necessary.
Sorry, Councillor, is that Greenbelt section or the principal?
Under Greenbelt, you haven't referenced Part B directly, but I've got the core strategy in front of me, and that's the bit that you're referencing from.
Yeah, I've got it.
Don't know. Let's get it up.
Apologies, Councillor. Hopefully we can now clarify. So it was done under B because, in a sense, it is extending a dwelling by the rear extension and the outbuilding. Part C, to a degree, could be relevant, but Part C is more applicable to, say, a replacement dwelling or, you know, redeveloping the whole of that land to another form of development.
That's great, thank you.
Right, I think I had Councillor Pemberton down next for a question.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, Ryan, have you engaged with the County Council's officers about this application?
Sorry, which department are you referring
So
to,
it
Councillor
would
Pemberton?
be, it's the supported living team.
Oh,
formerly
right,
Tim
sorry.
Willis's team. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, okay, the team you were on about when you were
Yeah.
across.
So have you
questioning.
engaged with that team, Ryan?
Well, I think the question is whether or not the planning team have, because in fact Ryan's presenting and the case officer.
I apologise. I thought Ryan was the case officer. My apologies.
Right, you're right. It is Ryan. It's the other one that he's presenting that he's not the case officer. Ryan.
No, not for this application. And I think Richard, the planning manager, touched upon it earlier.
Okay, I'm going to observe the comment that we only do this on large is not my experience. And bearing in mind that best practice for this kind of unit is for them to be small scale, if we are not engaging with the County Council on units of 4, 6, then we should be. And to answer the question, they have a wealth of experience and support to bring to bear to ensure that units such as this are designed properly, are located properly. And in the absence of that, how have you identified that this unit, if you want to call it a unit, whatever you want to call it, contributes to the identified need? Because it's the County Council that identifies the need.
Sorry, Councillor. So it's within the sort of principle, obviously policy CS19 and to a degree policy CS16 for this type of residential accommodation proposed. We have to look at the 4 criteria of the policy. The first one being in terms of, is there a need for the use, where the site is, the design, and obviously the arrangements of the unit. On the first part, we said it was a balancing exercise to say, well, you know, we acknowledge that there's been no justification for the need put forward, but as there is no cumulative increase or decrease in the amount of residential units, i.e. it's still a bungalow, then we considered it acceptable. Now, once and if it was a case that planning permission was approved for the development, there is nothing for the applicant to then approach the county council to do the finite details of the accommodation if they needed to. But in this particular regard, we didn't feel the need to have that consultation based on setting out our principle.
Does that answer your point, Councillor Pemberton?
It doesn't, but I think I'm not going to get any. I'm not sure I'm going to get more clarity from the officers.
Okay,
I'm
thank you.
I'm happy to
I
go
think
into debate.
from the point of view of getting on with this application, we could have a conversation offline about that, can't we, later on? Okay, I don't think there were further questions, so we can move into the discussion and debate about this application. Did anybody offer to start? Okay. No one's leaping, everyone's taking a step back apart from you.
I'm not happy
Councillor
with
Pemberton.
I'm not happy with this application. I don't think it's in accordance with policy CS16. The criteria, the type of specialist accommodation meets the identified district need. We have not engaged with the body that is responsible for this and for ensuring that the accommodation does meet the identified district need. That the proposal relates well to the existing settlement, easy access service facilities. I'm not happy that that's the case, particularly for this client group. The design of the proposal, including individual units, is capable of meeting the specialist accommodation support and care needs. Again, without the input of the county council as specialist officers, I do not see how we can accept that that is the case. Arrangements are in place to ensure the delivery of appropriate care and support packages. We're already told that this is not a CQC registered. My understanding of CQC registered is if you're not CQC registered, you can't deliver care and support. I don't see how they're going to do this. It doesn't meet the criteria in my view. At the very best, I would accept a deferral for the engagement of the county council. The comment was made that you don't do this until you've got it all set up and then you go to the body. That may well be the case with Worcestershire, South Staffordshire, but it is not the case with Warwickshire County Council, who have a proactive strategy around all types of specialist accommodation. I have had a number of applications, pre-app discussions in my ward for various different types of accommodation where the county council is engaged. They want to be engaged at the get-go. The bit about should we be referring this because of the size, I think that's an offline conversation. But I am not at all, I don't agree, and I certainly don't see that there's been any, special need identified in relation to the, to the green belt. There's no, I've forgotten the phrase now in relation to very special circumstances. In the absence of meeting CS16, I don't see it meets very special circumstances. I am minded to refuse. I could be persuaded that we go for a deferral and the county council get involved, and if they come back and they say this works, I can see a logic for it, but I am not comfortable about going with officers' recommendations as we currently stand.
Okay,
So I'll see the rest of the debate before making a proposal.
Yeah, okay, that's very interesting. Councillor Hench-Seraphin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree a lot with Councillor Pemberton, but I know this area. This used to be in my ward a few years ago, and I think it's not quite the right place to have this sort of facility. There's a main road very close. It's very noisy, very busy, lots of pollution. I don't think this is an appropriate place. It should be in a more quieter area. I'm not against such places, but I'm not happy with the application at all. Thank you.
Councillor Hench-Seraphin, thank you. I've got Councillor Fleming wants to speak next.
From my perspective, there's too many holes in it, really, in the application. Councillor Harvey brought up the fact of the staff changeover with cars. Hay Lane doesn't meet the A435 at 90 degrees. To actually sort of, the egress out of Hay Lane isn't always the best to try and see along that piece of road. It's on a slight bend. Like I say, there's too many actual holes in it. I don't know enough as much as Councillor Pemberton about the CPCs and all of those sort of things, but I just didn't like how it's been presented in terms of, yeah, well, we can do this and we do that. I don't think it actually nails down the concentration and the belief that the planner has that this will all work fine. So from that perspective, at this stage, the very best I'm going to do is abstain, but I don't think I'm going to be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Fleming. Who else would like to speak? Councillor Adam.
Thank you. I'd actually like a further point of clarification from the officers, if possible, just to inform my debate very briefly.
Yes, of course. Yeah,
Thanks.
I've got that.
It's with regards to the change of use. So it's going from C3 to C2. So does that qualify it to have to satisfy Part C of CS19? Because I mean, with regards to it being from residential dwelling to residential institution, as per the description in the legislation, does that require Section C of 19 to be satisfied to justify that use?
So in terms of CS19, that's considered in the principal section, so page 5 over onto page 6, and the report goes through those 4 bullet points, the key bullet point being number 1, so C1 of policy CS19, and the assessment is quite openly, whilst no justification for the need for the residential care home has been put forward, however, as there is no cumulative increase or decrease in the amount of residential units, I consider this acceptable in this regard. So we've taken into account another material consideration and not taken a strict approach. You could take a strict approach, but given what I said about the need for CQC approval, I'm struggling to see what the planning harm is.
Okay, thank you.
What is it else? What other information do you need to be able to be comfortable with this?
Sure. Okay. So to my mind, then we don't, by way of that justification, need to satisfy CS19C to justify this development, effectively, which is what I believe Councillor Pemberton is referring to in terms of the identified need. I mean, it's sort of just as a point around the discussion of that, for my part, I'm less uncomfortable about this development than other members have expressed, but I appreciate where they were coming from with that disquiet. And the reason I wanted clarity was to see how pertinent that particular issue was in planning terms, because I think it's also relevant to say we're talking about the consultations that we receive from different departments of different authorities. We are still looking at it in planning terms, and that I just wanted to boil it down to what we were obligated to observe, really. To that end, I'm less, I'm satisfied that that's not necessarily required, so I don't see that that's as much of an issue. Part of my questioning earlier on, in terms of asking one of our speakers and the officers, was about the identified need, and I think part of the Greenbelt issues that were raised by the ward member and the parish council were based around Greenbelt, and with regards to that, as I noted, it was Part B that was identified as the area that justified it within the Greenbelt, which again didn't specifically require an identified need to be met. So whilst I appreciate where the point is coming from in terms of making sure there is an identified need by the relevant authority, I feel that we are within our right and have the ability to justify this application without going through that process. So that's essentially an argument against deferral to do that. I'm still intrigued to see what other people hear. I just wanted to express that and kind of run through the thought process before we kind of got carried away.
Thank you. Okay, I think you might need to put that very succinctly again in a minute or two, because I think you probably lost quite a few of us as you described that particular issue regarding CS19. Councillor Pemberton.
Chair, it's not just the need. If you think about residential amenity, the purpose of engaging that specialist team is to ensure that the amenity of the occupiers of the property is satisfied. If you think about it, imagine we talk about space standards, you know, we're in things like that. So, you know, the policy does require, and even just on a residential amenity basis, I'm uncomfortable that we should be making a decision about specialist accommodation without the right input. This is not a bedroom, you know. This is an entire living space for people who are vulnerable with sensory deprivation, with learning difficulties. We have to get this right, and it is a legitimate rationale. I am uncomfortable, so I am going to move for a refusal, if I can get a support on that, because.
Can you explain on what grounds?
Well,
on what planning grounds?
So the scheme doesn't accord with policy CS16. The developments in the green belt, there's no overriding special circumstance demonstrated. That's broadly where I'm going with it. We haven't clarified the need.
Are you talking about those 4 criteria as well? Can you come on to that?
We have definitely not. We cannot, in my view, say those criteria are met, if those criteria are met, that would get you over concerns around the mass of the building. I'm not particularly concerned about that. I'm not convinced about the location, and in terms of how I look at the location of other units that I'm aware of, it's not. If I take the Bidford one, yes, there's a road to cross, but it's 70 yards to the shops. So I don't see that there's a special circumstance that justifies in the Greenbelt this development, particularly in the absence of being compliant with CS16. I would move for a refusal on those grounds if I can get a seconder for that.
Okay, just hold on a second then. I'm just going to pause for a minute. having a conversation about the policy issues and your proposal for a refusal based on CS16. So we're actually looking at CS19.1, but we are concerned about identifying the harm because the building, if it couldn't be occupied because it wasn't suitable, would revert to residential development, residential property. So there is a possibility that we could defer pending some sort of report from the agencies that you're speaking about. But I'm just making that point. But Richard's, no, I know, but I wanted to put that out there because it wasn't CS16, CS19, and it is the need argument, but then we've got to identify the harm arising from that. So I've got other people coming in. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I respectfully suggest to Councillor Pemberton that his refusal proposal is premature? My view, I think, is that this is a complicated issue. It's finely balanced, and Councillor Pemberton has knowledge which I don't have, and I suspect there's one or two others who don't share it either. I'm satisfied that this does not represent overdevelopment, which was one of the grounds of criticism. I think the officer has demonstrated that this isn't a significant increase. In fact, it's a decrease. Fine. It is a change of use, and I think that's where we struggle. I think the location, Ms. Kelly made the point that it was actually quite a good, from her perspective, quite a good location. And looking at the map and having looked at Google Earth, Hay Lane is it's on the open countryside side of the main road, and it leads into the countryside, and it's on the fringe of Mapleborough Green. So while I defer to Councillor Henshaw-Seraphin's greater local knowledge, it does strike me as if you're looking for a relatively quiet location, this is it. And in fact, that's indicated by the state of the road, being narrow and without foot pavements, etc., etc. In use terms, this isn't a development proposed which is hugely greater than properties that are in the neighbourhood. It may be slightly bigger, but it is not demonstrably a sore thumb in that sense, to use a crude expression. But I do think the point you eventually came to, Chairman, that if Councillor Pemberton says on the one hand that there is need to have the advice of the relevant authority, I meaning County Council, the planning manager has said, had this been a larger application, it would have been a question of going to the County Council, but it's only because it's a small instance that isn't the case. I think Councillor Pemberton has raised enough doubts in my mind of the necessity of having County Council input, because if the County Council came back and said, with planning reasons, that this was a suitable site for this sort of development, for this target audience, then I'd be persuaded. So I would urge a deferral in light of the need for that report. So I would ask Councillor Pemberton to reconsider.
Chair, I'm prepared
Councillor
to reconsider
Councillor Pemberton.
I'm prepared to reconsider and to request a deferral to engage the County Council. If they come back and they say, this is absolutely on all fours, this is the right place, this is the right type of unit, it hits all the marks, I'll support it. Because we do need this kind of stuff, but it's got to be done right, and I've got enough concern. I will amend my proposal to one of deferral to engage with the County Council.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that.
If I find a seconder for that.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll ask around in a minute, but I do value that, and I also value your specialist knowledge on this, Councillor Pemberton, which is probably beyond the majority of us here, so that's been a very, no, it's true. Don't be too modest, that's a bit unlike you, but it has been very useful indeed. Councillor Harvey.
Second, the proposal to defer.
Right, so we have a proposal to defer and defer to obtain more specialist advice from a consultation on these aspects of this need and the provision from the County Council?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, we will get a clarification on what exactly we're expecting to get from county. But the point has been already made that on larger developments, we seek their input in any case. So we probably already know what that is. But Councillor Pemberton might be prepared just to say, what are we looking for from the County Council?
In general terms, it's to understand, the layout design of the unit, the care regime, the support regime, because if it's not CQC, it won't be a care regime, support regime. Is it an appropriate location for that client group? Those kinds of things. They're the usual kind of things that on the larger units, and I think there is a discussion perhaps raised by this application about our approach, because small is actually where this stuff is going these days.
Can I just halt you there, if you don't mind? Now, the applicant has asked if they put their hands up, so they're trying to get my attention. I'm guessing that they'd like to make a statement of fact. You can't start to get into our debate because, facts have already been presented, your case has been presented, but if you wanted to clarify a fact and you've heard something that we're debating that's clearly not correct, then we would like to hear it because it would help. So if there is yes, you can come forward and put the microphone on, but you really need to stick to clarification of a point of fact. And I'll bring you in now because I don't want you to lose the opportunity going away to, if you think there's something wrong about our statements and there's a point of fact you want to clarify, please do so.
Thank you. CQC registration comes once you've got C2 planning. We can't go to CQC until that planning has been approved. All of our homes are CQC registered before anybody moves in.
Right. But you can't get it before you've got planning for a property.
Cannot.
So that's interesting. Councillor Pemberton.
The comment was made that they're not a CQC registered provider, was what I took it to be.
Can we get a point of clarification on that as well?
At this time, because for that property.
Oh, what about other properties?
Yes, we have other properties.
So is the CQC accreditation by property?
Yes.
Not by organisation?
No.
Okay, well that's a very helpful factual clarification. Thank you.
So I had took it that what was said was that they were not a CQC registered provider.
Well, that's clearly
it is true to say that
incorrect.
If
it's
you
about
if you have 10 units, you have to have 10 CQCs kind of thing.
That seems to be the case. You have one for each property.
Apologise for.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, so we've still got the issue of need and the engagement of Warwickshire County Council. Is suitable.
Sorry, what is being proposed, so to ensure from the County Council's specialist team that what is being proposed meets the needs of the service users, so in broad terms, residential amenity, okay? That's in terms of, the rooms and the layout and the regime that supports them, that there is engagement where appropriate and dependent upon the client group with local health services. All of those things feed into the County Council's assessment of any sort of unit such as this, regardless of its scale, for its appropriateness. So it's the kind of thing. If this was a 40-bed, clinical nursing home, it's the same kind of questions apply. So I'm sure that Richard and his team are quite adept at understanding the questions they need to ask and the engagement they need to have with the County Council.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pemberton. Just hold on a second.
Yeah, I'm happy I've got enough there to go to the County Council on.
Okay, well, we sort of got to it in a rather long-winded way, but it's an unusual application, certainly not one that perhaps many of us have been faced with before. So there was some specialist input that has been very helpful from some members. So we have a proposal to defer in a second. Before we decide what to do that, are there any other counter proposals that any members wish to put forward? And there's a lot of blank faces, so I'm guessing not. In which case, we'll take a vote on that proposal to defer, pending an assessment and report back from the county council in respect of these issues of need and suitability of the amenity of the residents and such like. So could I have a show of hands on that, please? I think that's unanimous, Kira, that yeah, we've got to a point where clearly some of us feel it's probably it's the right sort of thing to do, but we need to be assured that those that have the specialist knowledge in this area are also confident that it's the right thing to do in that location, and that's the right building with the right facilities. So I think on that, thank you very much. Thank you to those presenting and coming along. It's appreciated. I'll just take a short break for a few minutes, 15:15. Just need a little natural break, won't be a second, okay? We have everybody back? Can I? Yeah, okay. All right, well, thank you very much, members, for that short break. Kira, are we recording again? So we're moving on to the second item, or rather item 4 on the agenda, I think. Have I got that right? Let me have a look. Yeah, item 4, which is application 2501147, 3 Old Post Office, Henley Road, Claverdon. And the presenting officer is Ryan O'Keefe. The case officer is Lindsay Young. Ryan, if you'd like to take us through the application, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The application site lies within the settlement of Claverdon, as denoted by the black dot. Planning permission is sought for roof alterations to form a new living space at first floor and a 2-storey extension towards the rear. The application site is surrounded by residential properties and lies within the conservation area of Claverdon. The existing property is a single-storey flat-roofed dwelling lying adjacent to number 2, the old post office. The above plan shows the existing layout as a 2-bedroom dwelling. At present, the dwelling does not meet the national minimum space standards for a 2-bedroom single-storey dwelling, and the proposals are to extend it at first floor to provide the same level of accommodation in respect to bedrooms, albeit a bit upgraded and modernised for modern living, downstairs toilets, ensuite bathrooms. This would enable the property to meet the space standards for a 2-storey, 2-bedroom dwelling if planning was forthcoming. And yeah, with these are the proposed elevations from the main road, so from the street. And obviously, as you would come across from the side of the site, from the direction back towards the site, this is the neighbouring property number 2, the old post office, towards the rear, and then from number 15, Highcroft, further away from the site. Just some context photos, obviously, of the rear towards neighbouring properties to both boundaries on the left and the right above. From the road itself, facing the site, again with Highcroft in view, just in the foreground there. A little bit more of a longer, wider shot of the village itself, and then from the front of the dwelling. There's also some photos from the neighbouring property, which is one of the reasons for a refusal on neighbouring amenity, just for some context here and here as well. The officer recommendation is to refuse the application for the 2 reasons set out within the officer report.
Is that it, Ryan? Thank you. Anything else, Ryan, or have you finished? You finished? Okay, thank you, Ryan. Okay, we have some speakers on this application, and first we turn to Claverdon Parish Council in support of the applications. Councillor Fairley. Councillor Fairley, welcome. Good evening. Oh, you've already done it. Oh, no, you haven't. You turned it off. Well, it's the button on the right, as you've seen. So you have 3 minutes to talk about the application and your support for it. And I'll just say when you're ready, just start. Have you got any, no? So just start when you're ready and I'll the one with phone books? Okay. Over to you and I'll give you 30 seconds as you approach the end, okay? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chair and Councillors. My name is Martin Fairley. I'm Chair of Claverton Parish Council Planning Committee. The Parish Council supports the planning application for the following material planning considerations based on the Neighbourhood Plan. Section 4, Housing, supports small-scale extensions or alterations to existing dwellings which meet a local housing need and does not harm the openness of the Greenbelt. So, taken in order, firstly, it is considered to be a small-scale extension. It applies to an already very small property, only 47 square metres, which does not even meet the national minimum spatial standards for a 2-bedroom dwelling. And in addition, the external walls are only 1 brick thick, so no cavity wall, no insulation, but if the planning application were approved, that would be rectified as part of the development. The new footprint will only increase by 1.7 square metres at the rear, i.e. 3.5% of the existing footprint. Essentially, it's developing upwards. Secondly, this application meets a local housing need. There is a terrible shortage of reasonably priced starter homes for young people in Claverton. It has been a family home where the applicant, Jack, was brought up and lived with his mother until he went to university. Jack recently purchased the property from his mother as a home for himself and his new wife, Sophie, who is also local from Watton. Both want to remain in the village and support the local economy. If the application were to be refused, they cannot afford to remain in the village, which would be a great shame and a great loss to the village. Thirdly, it is considered this application does not harm the openness of the Greenbelt. That might be discussed a little bit later. It is, as you can see, in a built-up area in the centre of the village, surrounded by other houses. In fact, if the application is approved, it will greatly improve the street scene, the main road through Claverton, and will be in keeping with the style of the attached properties to the left-hand side.
Just to say, that's 3 minutes, so if you can sort of wrap up for us. Oh, super.
Sorry. In conclusion, this application meets the requirements of the Neighbourhood Plan, supported by the Parish Council. Should the application be granted, it will help to fulfil the housing needs of the village, providing a small two-storey bedroom, and it will benefit the centre of Claverton. And if it's not renovated, the Parish Council are concerned that it may become, may fall into decline and disrepair and be an even worse carbuncle. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Fairley. Members, do you have any questions for Councillor Fairley, please? No questions? Councillor Harvey.
This is just a question of fact, Councillor Fairley. You mentioned that this was a proposition which would meet a local housing need. Can you tell us something about your housing needs survey? What did it say, and when was it delivered? How old is it?
It is. Sorry, is that okay? Sorry. It's a few years old, but we are looking to actually renew it. It's something we're talking about at the Parish Council now, to have it updated. But the one that exists, there is a definite need, as you can imagine, for affordable housing, or not affordable housing in maybe the proper sense, but low-cost housing for young people to stay in the village, that have been born in the village, want to stay in the village. Otherwise, these people are going to have to, that have history in the village, you know, with rugby clubs and things like that. Otherwise, they will have to move elsewhere outside the village to cheaper accommodation. And that would be a great loss. So we definitely want to encourage, the parish council want to encourage housing that can be afforded by newly married young people.
Thank you. I'm looking around, there don't seem to be further questions, or I have one for you. Does your neighbourhood development plan make any reference to the impact of developments on neighbouring properties? I wondered if you could tell us what's in your neighbourhood development plan in respect of that.
Yes, I might need to get a copy out. Certainly it does consider overlooking and right to light. My understanding and the parish council view is that there is no, and I think the planner's report also touches on this, there is no, the right to light is no longer an issue, and overlooking, I believe, the parish council believe, is also not an issue. The new development will have, the house to the left has two tiny little windows on the gable end you cannot see that overlook the flat roof. But they are not the primary windows for the internal rooms. Those internal rooms have a very big window. That helps it. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think you probably... my question was about your neighbourhood development plan and policies in respect to it, and you said that it does take into account overbearing on neighbouring properties. Yes. Thank you. Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chair. Short and sweet. Page 19 of the report indicates that there's no evidence that there's a lack of accommodation of this scale available. Are there plenty of two-bed properties available in Claverden that are affordable, from your local knowledge?
I would say not many.
Sorry?
I would say not many that are affordable. Some have just been built along Lye Green Road, 2 3-bedroom properties, 1.1 million plus.
Thank you.
And sorry, again, off St. There's another development going ahead with 5 properties that are being developed. They are bigger. But still they're over £1 million.
Okay, thank you for that. And a bit of local knowledge from me. Is that phone box still working? Well, I'm just interested because it's very convenient for Jack and Sophie if it is.
Oh dear, you've dragged up something we discuss.
Yeah, okay. It's a slightly tongue-in-cheek question. So on that note, Councillor Fairley, thank you very much for your representation.
Shall I give you a quick answer?
If you can.
Sorry. The parish council are planning to remove it and upgrade it, and we've had so it will be removed.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, okay, thank you for that, Councillor Fairley. Helpful, yeah. Okay, so we have no objectors speaking, but we do have the applicant's agent speaking, which is a Mr. Jones. I've got your name down here, but are you speaking alone? Yeah, okay, come forward, Mr. Jones. Thank you, good evening. And you also have, but you've got someone with you that, I'm assuming it's Jack. Hello, Jack. Welcome. Right, Mr. Jones, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you.
I will give you a sort of bit of a heads up as you approach the end, and if then you can wrap up at that.
Just before I go ahead, I will need my slides to be shown on the screen, which I'd sent through. So if
let's get those up now before we start, so that you know what you've got up there.
Thank you very much indeed.
We wouldn't want that to be eating into your 3 minutes.
Certainly not.
So what
so
is that the how many have you got?
I think there are 7 in total, but I'll skip through, and it will be part of my presentation, so I'll tell you which slides I need showing as and when.
Okay, that's
So
fine.
I hope
yeah.
I've got somebody who's quick on the button to flip.
Well, you've
through.
got Ryan. He's reasonably quick.
Thank you, Ryan.
So, Ryan, you're right keeping up with this. All right, Mr. Jones. So, when you're ready, just kick off.
In view of recent changes to government guidance on Greenbelt, I don't believe the proposal materially infringes the spirit or purposes of Greenbelt policy that is essentially about preserving openness, which is clearly quite different when considering an isolated property in the open countryside to one which is in the built-up area, as in the case of this application. Under the revised MPPF, the fundamental aim of the Greenbelt policy is to prevent urban sprawl by keeping land open. There will be no harm to the openness of the Greenbelt by the development of my client's proposed extension. Please see slide 4. The subject property and the buildings surrounding it form an urban setting. Indeed, the 1970s housing development of Highcroft, which sits significantly above the level of Henley Road and the subject property, provides the backdrop. See slide 6. Paragraph 154G of the MPPF states quite clearly, development in the Greenbelt is inappropriate unless one of the following exceptions applies, and this is where subheading G kicks in: limited infilling or partial or complete redevelopment to previously developed land. This is previously developed land. Paragraph 153 of the revised MPPF goes on further. When considering any planning application, local planning authorities should ensure that substantial weight is given to any harm to the Greenbelt, including harm to its openness. Subject to footnote 55, which is particularly relevant, other than in the case of development on previously developed land or grey belt land, where development is not inappropriate. Interestingly, the planning case officer on page 19 of your committee report concurs that the site meets the definition of grey belt. This is a small-scale development to a very modest single-storey dwelling and will enhance this part of the Claverton Conservation Area. The case officer on page 20 of the report concurs with this. Due to the confusion regarding 15A Highcroft, which is a red herring, some of the comments on page 21 are considered irrelevant. The design of the hipped roof does not breach the 25-degree rule. See slide 7. Indeed, the planning case officer on page 21 of her committee report concurs there is no loss of amenity to numbers 14 and 15 Highcroft. My client's architect has deliberately not placed any windows or roof lights to any of the side elevations in order to protect the amenity of the neighbouring properties. For all the above reasons and its substandard size, I ask the members of the Planning Committee to approve this application for this small and sympathetically designed extension for which there is an urgent need. Thank you.
Right, well, thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Members, do we have any questions, please, in respect of that presentation? No? Okay, well, you've had your chance. Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, members, so here's your opportunity to ask for points of clarification from the officers. Who would like to do that? Oh, I'm sorry. I beg your pardon. You've got Councillor. So I'm awfully sorry. I turned over the page, Councillor Parker, and I'd forgotten that you were sitting there. I do apologise. So, Councillor Parker. Councillor Parker's got 5 minutes. You've got 5 minutes to talk about this application. Councillor Parker, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. So if this plan comes off, then you should hear nothing new from me that you've not heard already. This is a form of consolidation. And I want to kind of talk on a human scale, because ultimately one of the issues is that the planning officer has concluded that this is not small scale because the volume is quite large. And I'd like to bring two matters out of that. I think the first one is, when you have a building which is only 47 square meters, making any reasonable extension to your house is always going to be quite large as a percentage, even though the actual size of the extension is particularly modest. So that's an issue, and I'm sure members have found that in their own ward with that same issue. The other issue I've got is, because the planning officer feels that what is being offered is an enhancement to the conservation area, and that is because the architect has put particular effort into this design, and of course to make that design in this conservation area appropriate, it's got a large roof on it. This is not additional habitable volume, and in fact to prevent this going ahead, all we are doing is leading to another planning application being brought forward with a flat roof, which would bring the volume down dramatically, and hey presto, it would now be small scale, but it'd be pretty ugly in the conservation area. So that's my view on volume. On Greenbelt, again, my whole ward is washed over with Greenbelt, and so I have this problem from time to time where ultimately the Greenbelt, which has a really important purpose, and I think we all agree with that. We don't want sprawl. We want to contain villages and keep the identity of villages and not build along roads. This application is utterly in keeping with that. It does not cause the sprawl of Claverden. Indeed, it is it's the opposite of that. It is increasing the volume of the property without any significant increase on the footprint, as you've already heard. So this is a way of getting more volume into a property without sprawl. I think I'm on to my last point, fortunately for everyone. As has already been said, this property, and the clue's in the name, I guess, it's 3, the old post office. It has 4.5-inch walls in places. It is utterly unsustainable as living accommodation going forward. And somehow, and this is a kind of a wider point because we have a lot of old housing stock in this district, we have to find ways of getting residents to be able to invest in their properties to bring them up to modern living standards and not have them just hemorrhaging energy. They've got to put internal insulation throughout this house, and when you've only got 47 square meters, that is a real problem. That means you're just making your small house even smaller. With this application, because they're able to get the extra volume upstairs, this will allow them to do that internal insulation and cladding that is required to make this a modern habitable space. And I will just wrap up lastly, if you don't mind, on the whole issue of 15A. 15A is a recurring attribute of this report, and the report hinges on it and relies on it. 15A is not a property that pays council tax in this district. There's nothing on the electoral roll for it, and it doesn't appear on land registry. And yet we have someone who in 15A who has complained about this development. I think at the very least this falls below the standard we would expect of Stratford District Council planning, that it has not been done appropriately, and it includes this mythical 15A house which doesn't exist, and makes a report that hinges on it, and then at the 11th hour puts out a paper saying, well, actually just, airbrush out the 15A, it doesn't really exist and we got that wrong, but actually the report still stands. The report does not stand, 15A does not exist so far as I can find. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Parker. A question from Councillor Pemberton, I think, first.
Thank you, Chair. Leaving aside the myth or not, my understanding is that the issue is around, captured at the top of page 22 of the report. It talks about 15A, but it's presumably that property which is on the corner, the overbearing impact on that, of the extension on the amenity of that property. So can you, regardless of whether it's 15A or whatever, can you comment upon...
Yes, Councillor Pemberton.
We're just going to see if I've just asked the case officer if he could just put a plan up so that we could be sure of what we're talking about for members' benefit.
Yes, thank you.
So perhaps you could just talk us through, we can see the application site, the 3 old post office, we can see 15 on the corner.
Correct. And 15, according to the report and the planning officer, is fine and there is no material effect.
Okay, so which is...
It's 15A. It's in the report, Councillor.
I think what we'll do, Councillor Pemberton, we'll use the opportunity to ask the case officers for this clarification of this, which property is suffering potentially from this development. Okay, we're a bit confused ourselves, I think. Anybody else like to ask a question of Councillor Parker? How much is that? Just clarification, Councillor Parker. This is 2 bedrooms now, but very, very small. And it's having an upstairs extension, 2 bedrooms. So there'll be living space downstairs,
correct, yes.
2 bedrooms upstairs.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let us, if there's no further questions, I think we'll use the opportunity to talk to the case officer about detail.
I just want to refer to make sure
Yes.
heard the question right. Did I answer that correctly?
2 bedrooms upstairs.
Correct.
Living downstairs. Yes. Super, thank you very much. There was another point, actually. I'd just like to ask you, you raised this issue of, is it large scale, small scale in relation to Greenbelt? Were you talking about the quantum of the change in volume, it being very small, rather than the percentage of the increase? Could you just clarify what you understand of the quantum?
Yes, so I think what I'm referring to is the fact that the percentage rule and the percentages that are used by case officers, by planning officers, sorry, which is a relevant and useful tool. Don't get me wrong, but there are certain circumstances, and with every rule, there is always 1% where the rule is perverse, and I think that is why it is really good that members here are listening to this, because I think in this application it is perverse. The quantum is actually quite modest. The percentage appears large.
Thank you for that, Councillor Parker. Okay, so thank you very much. Right, members, the opportunity to ask questions of the planning officers. Councillor Pemberton has indicated to start. Thank you.
So I do want to understand which property from the map, from the plan, is being overbeared upon. Is that such a word? But the other question I have, just to get my understanding around the sort of mass and scale, just to help me, what is the minimum space standard for a 2-bed property? Because this is 47 square metres. If it were at the minimum standard, what would that actually be, please?
That would be the minimum standard of the current legislation or the current requirements.
Yes. Yeah, no, thank you, Councillor. So, I have just a second. So, for a 2-bedroom, single-storey dwelling, it'd have to be 50 square metres to hit the required standard. Obviously, we're looking at 47 square metres, so there's obviously a difference of 3 square metres. So for a 2-storey dwelling, so for a 2-storey, 2-bedroom dwelling, you're looking at 79 square metres.
And the size of what's proposed, is it more than 79?
It comes to about 89 square metres.
So it's a bit big. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's happy with that. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a number of questions. Mr. Jones made the reference to his slide 7 and the 25 degree rule, and said as far as 14 and 15 Highcroft were concerned, there was absolutely, I think his actual words were, no loss of amenity. Now, is that an assessment that the officers agree with?
No. Now, obviously it's been put in the update sheet, and I think it's important because the case officer has obviously made an assessment on the application based on objections and comments from neighbouring properties. It was important for us to, at the time of making that decision, to record what we had. We've obviously got the clarification, and we now know that 15A is not an independent dwelling. It is an ancillary annex accommodation to number 15. Now, the report has obviously touched upon 15A being impacted by the window at ground floor, which would be the study. That remains unchanged in that it is still a study, it is still serving a habitable room. Yes, the 25 degree line is not breached by the extension, but the 25 degree rule is part of Part F of the SPD. It is guidance to guide officers, but within that guidance, it is key that there are other considerations as part of that assessment, one being the existing site built form, and it is within the officer's assessment that given the distance between the neighbouring properties, that introducing this further built form towards the neighbour would cause an impact. And I think it is, important that at the moment you have got about 12 metres of a gap of built form. That 12 metres is from that window across to number 2, the old post office, which would decrease to 5.7 if the third floor is approved to that window.
Ryan, could I ask if you've got, you've shown a plan though, have you got an elevation that we can just refer to so that we can see? That's the plan of 15, is it not, Ryan?
Yes.
So that's the plan of the neighbouring property. What I'd like to see is the elevation that will help us understand the gap between the two buildings as it currently stands and what the impact will be on number 15.
Yeah, so obviously side elevation as proposed to be built. At the moment, number 15, they get the view I'll bring that up in a second. At the moment, they look towards number 2A, and obviously as part of the development, they will be viewing that extension from their property. In terms of the current situation, if I refer to the neighbouring property photos on 14 and 15. That is from the study window, from the garden, and just some context photos as well. So obviously at the moment, I'm talking about the gap. You know, at the moment, that gap is the flat roof of the dwelling back towards number 2. And just a context shot showing obviously the rear wall of number 15 and their garden, which you can obviously see it is a constrained garden in that regard.
Okay, thank you. That is helpful to leave that up, actually, if you wouldn't mind for a minute.
Okay.
Yes, of course, carry on.
That's a very interesting change from 12 metres to 5.7 metres. How do I evaluate 5.7 metres? Is there a standard by which I can just come to a conclusion that's okay, or is there a standard which says actually that's not okay?
I don't think there's... You want to do it?
We're talking about daylight, as I understand it, rather than privacy in this regard, aren't we? We're talking about the 25-degree test and the fact that that would come closer.
No. What I'm driving at is 5.7 okay or is it not okay? If 5.7 means something in terms of light or other amenity, then that's fine. But I just wanted to know factually whether 5.7 is okay or not okay.
There's no window in that elevation, so it can't be privacy. It can only be light. Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's all about light. It can't be about privacy because there's no window in that that proposed side elevation. So when it's all about light, daylight as opposed to sunlight, the 25-degree test is what you use for where something's head-on like this, and as you've seen from the plan, it meets it. But that's not the end of it. The SPD says you've still got to assess the full circumstances. It's a start, it's a guide, and in this case, given that it's so close and it has so much width, officers have assessed that it would still cause an unreasonable loss of daylight to the rear of the neighbouring property.
When you say width, can you just clarify, Richard, do you mean the depth of the property, because front to rear, because the neighbouring properties, they're looking out into their back garden onto a property that's side on to them?
Yeah, when I say width, I mean the distance from, on the left-hand photograph, the distance from left to right across that flat roof.
So almost the depth of the property?
Yeah, the depth of that property, although it would appear as width from the property we're looking from.
Okay, so when Councillor Fairley, in his statement, made the statement that he thought that there was no longer a right to light, he's just simply factually wrong, is he?
Right to light is a private matter separate from planning law. Planning law has the things like the 25-degree test and 45-degree test, which overlap a lot of the right to light law, but they're not the same thing.
Okay, that's helpful. Can I test out the understanding of Greenbelt and the impact on concentration, so to speak? The point, I think, was made that the purpose of Greenbelt is to stop urban sprawl, and that there's one sort of suggested there's, in the evidence given, that there's one test in the open countryside where there's plenty of space, and that there's a different test where it's in a more built-up area. Is that an accurate interpretation?
It is in some respects. With respect to domestic extensions, it's the same throughout the green belt. With respect to new build dwellings, it differs slightly in that you can have limited infill within a village, whereas obviously you couldn't have infill in the open countryside. So there are differences in how it's applied.
Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chair. Could the officers just put up the plan, the site plan showing number 15 or 15A or whatever it's calling itself at the moment? I just want to see the sort of looking down on the Right, so going back to the picture that, can you just go back to the picture that you had flashed up before that? What I'm trying to get to understand is that picture taken at the boundary of their garden, or is there more garden behind where that picture's been taken from? What I'm trying to understand is, as I see it, we're talking about overbearing in relation to one window and that part of the garden. What I'm trying to understand is there another 30-foot of garden behind where the photograph's taken from? I'm trying to understand the full impact of overbearingness on the whole of the site property. So can officers help with that?
You might want to put up the plan of 15 again, Ryan, and just indicate where the garden wraps around. I think that's
where
what
the
you're
photograph was taken from. Is it halfway along the garden or right at the boundary?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I've just brought up this photo, just showing back towards number 15. Obviously you can see the study window at ground floor and the window at first floor. It's the garden in this immediate area which should obviously be affected because it's closest to the neighbouring property, the application site. What we understand is it is one garden which you would require when you have a dwelling with an annex. What we experienced when we visited that neighbouring property, there is an element of separation to give both occupiers within that unit a degree of own space, but it is, you know, a garden for all occupiers.
Okay, so just so I can understand this, so what we're looking at here is from the application site into the neighbouring garden.
Yeah.
What is being suggested is that the part of the building that's projecting towards us and the bit that's further away are in separate occupations and or ownerships, but there is a shared garden between them. Is that what I'm actually hearing?
Yeah,
It's a shared amenity space.
Yeah, so
our wraps around down there. Okay, I've got that. Is that
so so it's one ownership. It's and it's different occupation in respect. You've got the family and then the annex accommodation. Yeah.
Got it. I understand that now. Thank you.
No, that's okay.
I see that the agent's indicating to perhaps offer a point of clarification or a factual point. Mr. Jones, if you'd like to come up. If you could stick to a point of fact in case we are something has been misrepresented, please.
This may be helpful to the committee. On my slide 2, it shows the floor plans for the dwelling, number 15, when it was extended under planning application back in 1988. If you could flick up to that, you may find that helpful in actually illustrating the amount of garden that 15 actually has, because it's a considerable garden. It's not as per those photographs.
Yes, we'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
It might help us.
And the second point for clarification is the window on the extension closest to the property on the annex is obscure glass. It is a bathroom window.
On the first floor?
On the first floor at 15.
Thank you.
Thank you. Clear glass at the ground floor.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you for that. So what are we looking at here, Ryan? We're looking at a previous application to extend 15, are we?
Yes.
So can you help Councillor Pemberton understand the garden space and the position of the annex?
Yeah, so obviously you've got the approved drawings here, which obviously shows a bedroom and I can't read that. I think it dining room, living room. Yeah, I think it is dining room. Obviously, when they've made their assessment, they would have looked at this plan, and if there was any changes in that regard, the most up-to-date floor plan that we have is going by Rightmove, which I'll bring up now. Bear with me. Bring you back to this one. In terms of the structure, nothing materially different. It still has a dining room at ground floor. The study at the back has been put in, the staircase remains, and obviously first floor, an ensuite bedroom.
Just to help members, Ryan, can you use your cursor just
Yeah.
to circle the area you're talking about?
Yeah. So,
Right, so this is what's already, this is there, but that was an extension some years ago.
yeah.
Okay. The question I think was raised by Councillor Pemberton to try and understand the garden space actually, and I'm not completely clear on that myself. Can you just go back to the garden? Ah, right, the plan, yeah. Oh, and that's showing the orientation, is it?
Yeah.
Talk us through that, please.
Yeah, so the extension to 15 is obviously that little projection along here. So obviously the study window is there, and that would be the area of garden affected. Obviously, they have got the garden over here, but also bear in mind that the extension will extend the full length of that area there.
Thank you, Ryan.
Chair, it would be helpful. Could you put your cursor where where that photograph was taken that showed the sort of narrowness of the 5 point? Where was this photo? About there.
Yeah. Oh, did not mean to. There we go. Yeah.
So behind there's a more substantive amount of garden.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Passingham, please.
Can I have some clarification about the this 15-degree rule and which isn't a right to light, but 15-degree rule? You're saying it fails on that particular rule. Is that a sort of a cast iron planning rule that we, as a planning committee, cannot decide against?
It passes the 25-degree test, and that was on the plan you saw a little while ago, where the slope of the 25-degree line just clips the top of the roof, but it clears it. So it passes that test. It is a test. It is not cast iron. So it's a starting point. In most cases, it's enough. But in this case, as I said before, the width or depth, if you want, of proposed extension is such that officers still consider that the proposal causes an unreasonable loss of daylight, even though it passes the 25-degree test. In a lot of cases, if it passed the 25-degree test, that would be fine, but you're usually applying it on side-to-side dwellings, not side-to-back dwellings like this. And in this case, the harm is significant.
So, sorry, can I supplement? So it actually passes a rule, but then in your planning opinion, then there's still a restriction on light. That is, but can this committee take a different view on that?
Of course it can, yes. That's officers' opinion. Your SPD has a 25-degree test, but then it goes on to say you'll have to take into account individual circumstances using the 25-degree test as a guide. And in this case, with that as a guide in mind, it's still harmful because of the depth of the extension.
Councillor Harvey.
Perhaps I'm just slow in the uptake. This reference to 12 metres and 5.7 metres gap. Can the officers point out where those two distances actually lie on the plan? Where is the 12 and where is the 5.7?
That you mean the distance between that property and the neighbouring property across the top of the single-storey building, and then what it would be like if the extension were to be built?
Yeah. So the 12 metre is obviously from the end of that wall there, which would be the study, across to number 2 by there. And obviously the 5 metres would be back pretty much to the boundary, because that's where the extension then builds up on that part of the development.
So the just to get it absolutely clear, the 5.7 metres is the distance between the extended portion of number 15 to the boundary that's proposed. Fine, thank you. I understand it.
And the extension is the full depth of that old post office. Okay, councillors, any further questions for the case officer, in which we can probably go on to a detailed discussion and debate about this particular application, merits or otherwise? Councillor Adam.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in support of this application, which isn't normally the case for Greenbelt apps, but I think there's a number of characteristics which seem to have come out more out of the wash throughout the course of the representations we've heard and what we've explored with the officers. Reading the report, I think it seems on the face of it that it's, well, something of a catch-22 in a number of cases, because to my mind it might not have been a residence at all, considering it clearly wasn't when it was built. But you know, we're not questioning the legality of it being a residence now, so I think we need to put that aside and move on to sort of what's practical moving forwards. In terms of the bulk and volume, which is the used as a justification for it not being small scale when considering under the Greenbelt policy, I think it is, 86% in the report is obviously a large percentage. I think the issue I have is the way that is massed is relative to the built form itself. So the hipped inclined roof is very different from if it were a sort of vertical face against that same boundary, which could hypothetically be of a similar volume increase, but have a much more significant impact in terms of bulking. So I feel that there is flexibility in the way in which we interpret that as to how we consider it in terms of small scale. I think there's always going to be, this is where it's with catch-22, there's always going to be an issue with it being small scale or not, because it's already it is a house, and any extension based on the size of it will be large. So I feel that we can justify that through our own interpretation. In terms of the way in which we look at the SPD, reading through it, I'm satisfied that the 45-25 degree test is, because it is met, and again the inclined roof, I think that plays into the conversation about the daylight and how that affects the neighbouring properties. I was very glad that the officer put up the radius of the sun's path, because that was in my mind when looking at it on the map. I think it's incredibly pertinent, again, the inclined roof and the way in which a significant part of that daylight will be completely unaffected by what's being proposed here. So again, I understand the interpretation, and particularly with regards to the rear elevation versus side, but I think that we can be favourable in how we perceive that based on the limited impact on the impact of the arc of the sun, effectively. And then in terms of distances, which is the next aspect of the SPD, it goes on to talk about loss of light, overshadowing, loss of privacy, and overbearing impacts. I think all of those are kind of encompassed by what I've said with regards to the green belt and how we interpret that aspect of the policy. So again, I feel that this is a difficult one to square. I can understand where the officers have come from, but I think this is probably a good example of why planning committees are useful in having that view with regards to difficult circumstances. I'm favourable for it, and I'm not, well, it'd be remiss of me not to propose grant at this point because I've spoken so lengthily on it. Normally I'd listen to the debate first, but I will propose grant in this case.
Okay, we'll come back to you on your proposal for grant, which is against the recommendation of the officers. One thing that I think, we're looking at the side elevation, and Councillor Adam made a point to members about the effect of the hipped roof on the sunlight available to number 15. It would be useful to put the sun track back up while we continue the debate. Who else would like to speak? Councillor Henry-Seraphin.
Yes, I don't think it has an impact on the lights as the roof slopes back away from number 15. I think this is actually a good application. It improves the street scene. It's far better than what's there now, and it's for modern day living, and we should encourage this sort of thing and not go against it. I don't think it has an impact on anything. It would improve somebody who wants to stay in the village, and we should encourage that. We shouldn't have to drive them away. And as for the green belt, there's houses all around it, so it doesn't have any impact on the green belt, in my opinion. So I'd rather grant this application in line.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Henry-Seraphin. I would just, in response to what you just said, say that whilst you think there's no impact, the objectors at number 15 are not here to have spoken about it, which is unfortunate in my opinion. But Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Adam is absolutely right. This is the kind of application that does need to come to a committee because there is a balance here. I accept that there is harm to the residential amenity of number 15, 15A, whatever it's calling itself tonight. As against that, we have a property that has correctly been a residential property that is, quote, substandard. And we have a family occupying a property that is substandard and is seeking a mechanism by which they can improve their residential amenity. And I think the architect has done the best that they possibly could in terms of a design. In some respects, the granting of the planning application in 1988 sort of took the opportunity away from the future occupiers of the old post office. In the absence of that projection, I doubt officers could have legitimately argued that the overbearing nature of this design would apply. I agree that there is some overbearing, there is some loss of amenity. Having said that, it does meet the 25-degree test. I am also minded that there is a substantial amount of garden amenity to the property and that the harmful impact is focused in one area of the property, and to my mind that is it is offset by the lack of impact on the amenity of the rest of the garden space and the property, full stop. I am minded to support Councillor Adam in coming to a recommendation to grant. The key issue is at the top of page 22, and it's talking about that this is contrary to CS9, CS20, and Part F because of the impact on residential amenity. I take the view that in the round, the impact on the residential amenity of the property versus the impact on that focused area of the property is not such that CS9, CS20 and Part F are engaged.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other members wishing to put, yes, Councillor Fleming?
From my perspective, this is the best use of space that's possible, given what the people are starting with. They're a village family. We should be improving any properties such as this. I mean, we've had this over the last few years about small farm workers' cottages being too small for modern living. This is exactly what this is, basically. A modern family needs more than 48 square metres. So I think, and it's grey belt rather than green belt, is that right, what we were talking about? So again, I think harm, but the harm is so inconsequential in the grander scheme of things that if Councillor Adam decides to propose grant, then I'll support him on that as well.
I'll come back to Councillor Adam. So, Councillor Adam, if you're minded to, I don't know if we made a proposal actually, but if you are minded to make a proposal, I'd like you just to make it clear exactly on what grounds that you are proposing it against the officer's recommendations. If you could just clarify that, and also can you confirm that you'd be happy for any conditions attached to such a grant to be delegated to officers. And then when you've done that and the planning officer's happy with it, I'll come to Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you. Yes, so I believe that we have the opportunity to, our judgment can determine this as small scale extension or alteration of the building to satisfy the requirements under CS10 for the green belt. And that the...
In terms of small scale, let's just be clear. We're talking about a very modest square meterage extension, perhaps, and that's why you consider it to be small scale, yes, rather than a percentage increase on the existing property, because it's so small, anything's going to look large. So we've taken into account the square meterage of the extension rather than the percentage because of the special circumstances.
Yes, and indeed the report refers to volume, and I think that's not necessarily the appropriate way to judge the scale of it, because the massing is relative to the form of the development, i.e. the pitch of the roof.
The planning manager just wants to ask you points of clarification.
I hear what you say about the volume, but that is the standard test of scale in planning terms. I would be more comfortable. At the moment, it sounds like you're saying it is small scale and therefore not disproportionate just because it's small. But if it's small, the scale is small, so everything just shrinks down. So I'm not following the logic there. What would be preferable and certainly far more supportable were if members concluded it wasn't small scale and was therefore disproportionate, but there were very special circumstances, and I've heard numerous things that would qualify as special circumstances. I've heard that it improves the street scene, that's special. It upgrades it to modern day living, and by that I think Councillor Hencher-Serafin meant that it was being insulated and upgraded. And then there's the point about substandard size. So all of those are capable of being very special circumstances.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to be guided by the officer on this. My sort of broader sort of philosophical opinions aside, I think those are very
reason one, special circumstances. Do you want to come on to the issue of the green belt? or are we to no the overbearing?
Yes,
is the
sorry, the
second issue.
overbearing.
So can you just cover off your reasons there in respect of the second?
Certainly. So I think that because
point.
we don't have a technical failure of the 45-25 degree test, and that then plays into the further test of that rule relates to sunlight, and the orientation of the neighbouring garden and rear elevation is largely unaffected due to that orientation, as we see there.
And the design of the hipped roof
Precisely.
as well, you're saying, adds to that, that something to take into consideration.
Precisely.
Hang on a minute.
Yeah, I struggle with that one as well, because what you're doing there, is the 25-degree test is a daylight test, not a sunlight test. You're saying it fails a daylight test, but it's okay because it meets a sunlight test, and the two tests are different. What you could do... Okay, go on.
Well, so it didn't fail the test.
What could you say?
Okay, oh, so you...
Because
Yeah,
the angles are suitable as
you're not
per the
agreeing with us
yeah.
on the width point I keep mentioning.
Yeah, sorry,
Gotcha.
that's the next one I was coming to.
So in daylight terms, meets the 25, and you're happy with that full stop. In sunlight terms, the sun plan shows that in sunlight terms it's acceptable. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and then the final point is separation distances, which there's, as per the SPD, there's not a technical limit on that. I.e. there's no set out distances within the SPD. It refers to loss of light, overshadowing, loss of privacy, and overbearing impacts. And I feel that, rattling through those, so the loss of light I feel we've addressed, and the overshadowing similarly, because of the built form being inclined, so you're not going to have direct shadowing from, say, a vertical gable. The loss of privacy is addressed through the, precisely the lack of windows on that elevation, and the overbearing impacts. Again, I feel that the hipped roof and the existing built form of the building having a vertical wall up in that location means that effectively there's no disproportionate increase in overbearing nature.
And finally, conditions. Happy to delegate those to officers.
Very happy to delegate this to officers.
Okay, and Councillor Pemberton, you happy to second that?
I'll second that. I'm cool with all of that.
Okay, members, right, we've got a well done. We've got a proposal. Oh, hang on a second.
I can do that.
Can you do that now?
Yeah, I'd recommend 3. I'd recommend standard 3 years. I'd recommend approved plans and materials to match existing. Have you got any more?
I'll go with that as well.
Yeah. Can I add an additional one? We should remove PD rights for any new side-facing windows.
Yep.
Agreed.
Councillor Pemberton, you're happy to second on the basis
Certainly
of those 4 conditions? Thank you. Okay. So, members, on the basis of a proposal and a seconder for a grant against the officer's recommendations for the reasons given, could I see a show of subject to conditions, the wording of which will be delegated to officers? Thank you, Amy. Could I have a show of hands, please? Well, that's good. Thank you. That's unanimous. So, on that basis, I'll just say that committee resolved to grant this application. I'll give you the number. 25-01147 full. 3, the Old Post Office, subject to conditions, the wording of which is going to be delegated to officers. Thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions this evening. They've been 2 very tricky cases, and I appreciate your support. Thank you. Good night. Oh, hang on. There's no other business. So I can bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much.